Well, Turning Point USA became just as much about the turning point for the GOP. I want to talk about what Charlie Kirk's death has meant for the collapse of the right-wing media ecosystem. Have you found it at all peculiar that right as Charlie Kirk's death occurs, an extraordinary amount of infighting starts to happen in MAGA world? And I want to be clear, his death isn't what caused the collapse in MAGA, but it certainly created a power vacuum that allowed for it to grow significantly, exponentially. The small fissures that were already developing before Charlie Kirk's death became canyons, and I would argue irreconcilable canyons. See, there were two big issues that even Charlie Kirk was dealing with before he was unfortunately shot and killed on that Utah campus. The Epstein files, which were continuing to agitate right-wing influencers and provocateurs, Charlie Kirk amongst them, trying to reconcile why now that Donald Trump and the Republicans were in power, they were not making the Epstein files available. But there's also the problem of rising anti-Semitism, not just anti-Israel sentiment, differences of opinion between supporting Israel or not, but clear, outright hostile anti-Semitism coming from provocateurs like Nick Fuentes. And many of you will remember there were a lot of really difficult moments that Charlie Kirk had on stage trying to referee and negotiate both sides of this. Turning Point USA was not built like some organic Twitter account that somehow blew up because Charlie Kirk was a phenomenal debater on college campuses. Turning Point USA was an extremely sophisticated, extraordinarily well-financed operation, a communications drill that took political activity to the next level. It really became the main conduit that the right wing, that the Republican Party, this digital age Republican Party, began to connect with younger people, began to connect with Latinos, particularly males, African Americans, a lot of these non-traditional constituencies, particularly those in the working class who spend or out-indexed other constituencies on social media. They were meeting, in essence, these voters where they were at, where Democrats relied overwhelmingly on door-to-door knocking and precinct activity in heavily non-white communities. Talking Point USA, other sophisticated right-wing influencers, and an extremely well-resourced, well-financed communications operation was meeting people on their phones. That's why they were able to move the numbers of these voters the way that they did, not necessarily by selling a GOP agenda, but by attacking and undermining the Democratic Party's main messages and main messaging framework. So I don't mean to get off topic here, but it's important to understand that Charlie Kirk was not an organic grassroots activist that somehow found some level of success. He was there for a designed and specific purpose with some of the largest donors in the country for the Republican Party. Hundreds of millions of dollars were moving through his organization, putting other influencers on the payroll to elevate their voices and create an echo chamber on social media with key demographics that they were building out. I'm not suggesting it wasn't smart either. Democrats are actually trying to double down on this and copy it. All of which goes to say this extraordinarily sophisticated operation begins to crumble right as the Republican Party and Donald Trump's administration starts to face some very significant challenges. It's the discipline and the platforming that Charlie Kirk provided so many of these other echoing voices. Once they went away, once Charlie Kirk pulled the curtain back, or at least the curtain was pulled back because of his death, what you see is a power vacuum. This is power vacuum politics, the same way you would see this happen in a multipolar world with a global hegemon like the United States losing its power. A vacuum fills, and these second nations, second power starts to elevate and scramble for positioning. That's what happened with Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes, Megyn Kelly, Tim Pool, and on and on and on. All of these folks are fighting for stature in this vacuum. But notice that the vacuum isn't ideological. The vacuum is all about network, reach, and money. It's a grift from top to bottom. This has nothing to do with values, has nothing to do with policy positions. It has everything to do with the size of your social media following and the size of the voice that you're able to promulgate in the echo chamber. That's why Charlie Kirk's death has been so damaging to Donald Trump when he has needed it the most. It's not just the size of the megaphone, which was important. It's the discipline that it imposed upon everybody else that was either feeding off of it because of money or needed to be platformed by it to amplify their own voices. See, the reward structure was to follow and amplify Charlie Kirk's operation as much as possible, to get as close to him as possible, but more importantly, to get as close to those resources as possible. Now, a lot of those resources are still there, but without the personality, without his decision-making of who would get a speaking role at Talking Point USA, his ability to bring the President of the United States and some of the largest figures into the audience, along with right-wing media influencers, that's gone. That's gone. And once that's gone, the discipline, the reward structure, the incentive structure to stay on message, to stay within the tent of what you can and cannot talk about, starts to dissipate, or not even dissipate. As I say in a Substack essay I wrote today, the kennel doors open and the dogs run in a million different directions. Because once that power vacuum opens up, politics abhors a vacuum. Something is going to fill it. And the race was immediately on to become that dominant voice to fill that top of the pyramid spot. That's inevitable in any environment where money or power is the overriding incentive. Not policy, not virtue, not philosophy, not values. All of this was compromised by the Republican establishment and even the activist and voter base when they decided to enable and bend the knee to Donald Trump. Once you capitulate your basic values, your core virtues, and even the central philosophical tenets that make a party work, well, there's nothing else to support. There's nothing else to be rewarded by. There's nothing else to advocate for other than money and stature and capacity. Capacity meaning the size of your social media network. That's what is gone. And so once you have a party that no longer believes in it once believed in, the party of lower taxes is now the party of Trump tariffs. The party of free markets is now the party of using these tariffs as a personal cudgel to enact Donald Trump's virtue, a protectionist party, the exact opposite of what Reagan-Bush conservatism meant. Once you start playing footsie with the Russian threat, when you have spent every waking moment since the end of the Cold War fighting Russia, fighting its need for imperialist domination in that region of the world, if not the globe, who are you? What do you stand for? And once you capitulate on basically every tenet of what you believed in as a Republican, once you decided that that no longer mattered, well, the only thing that's left is power and money. That's the siren song of politics. And that's what the right-wing media ecosystem is essentially built on. Influence, money, reputation as it exists in MAGA world, and social media reach. That's the infrastructure that became the gold, the currency of the MAGA movement. And so Charlie Kirk played a much more important role. This idea that he was some sort of a brilliant operator. Sure, he was certainly talented, or that he was somehow the second coming of Jesus Christ because of his Christian values. I'm not even going to address that one. It's just so absurd on its face. But the fact that he was raised so high on a pedestal wasn't because he was an exemplar of virtue, or that he was able to articulate the values of a genuine philosophical movement. This was a guy who was essentially a professional troll. But he was a moneyed one. He was backed by the most significant financial backings in the Republican movement as it exists, because they wanted that infrastructure to take over what the legacy media left behind. So he was a first mover. He was a prime mover. He was perfectly positioned to speak to younger people and non-traditional audiences in a way that neither Republicans or Democrats had ever seen before. I will absolutely give him credit for that. He innovated and redefined a whole way of reaching an audience that not only Republicans had a problem getting to, but Democrats had a problem getting to. But keep this in mind. The moment that it was decided that he was going to be the face of this new infrastructure, it also exposed a deep weakness if he were ever to leave the stage. And unfortunately, in leaving with his life, there was no replacement. There was nobody who could possibly ever take that role, because the power structure was built on his decisions. The power structure was built on his desires on who was going to be platformed, what policy positions were going to be the message of the day, and it's why he had such a close personal relationship with the White House. That's not replaceable by Erica Kirk or a Candace Owens or even a Tucker Carlson, because that vacuum, that power structure is entirely built on a cult of individual. It's not unlike what you would see with different cartels, where the one leader of a cartel or a mob boss going down, all the families are going to try to fill that void. That's what they're trying to accomplish. That's what you're witnessing right now. That's why this internal battle between the Nick Fuenteses and the Candace Owens and the Megyn Kellys and Tucker Carlsons and you name it, they're all at war with different people, because what they're all trying to do is jockey for position to fill a bigger part of that power vacuum that has been exposed. Again, this is not the sign of a healthy political movement. It's more emblematic of fighting middle school kids on their social media platforms, except there's a hell of a lot of money at stake. So when Charlie Kirk left the scene, he didn't just pull back the curtain and reveal that there was no Wizard of Oz. He took the whole curtain with him and exposed the fact that there was nothing but a lie. And of course, the Epstein files hanging over the back of this entire operation, where nobody is able to direct or enact any sort of message discipline. And that makes it even more difficult for this president to recover specifically, but the MAGA movement generally. These sheep need a shepherd, and nobody has stepped up yet to fill that void.